Dr. Smithies, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
My pleasure, Alistair.
What is it that maybe most excites you about sort of next generation for genetics or the future of the field?
I don't know that I ever think about things in that way, or about what is the most exciting. Things happen, and you get turned on by the beauty of the science, and not necessarily genetics. So I must say, perhaps the thing that I found most enjoyable in the fairly recent science is the discovery of cells in the brain which are triggered to remember where you are, as it were. They're almost like GPSs. Global position satellites, a cell, and the Nobel Prize was just given to the person who first found that if you have wandered around, if you come to a certain position, a cell will be triggered. So it has stored the memory of position, and that's an incredible advance to understand that.
So it's less about, predicting, it's more the things that sort of take you by surprise, what you're not expecting.
I think that's probably true, yeah. The things that take you by surprise are the most exciting, aren't they?
And I imagine there's been a lot of things over the years that have taken you by surprise. I mean, what is something, maybe stand out as, over the years you've observed what has surprised you the most? Or
I went to a meeting where a person called Walker, and he got the Nobel Prize for this work, discovered how the body can make energy-rich phosphate, which is the way the body stores energy, making this compound energy-rich phosphate by moving hydrogen ions, moving acid from inside mitochondria to outside mitochondria, and that the transport of the hydrogen ion generates ATP, the energy machine of the body, and it's a mechanical thing. The protein has a little whirligig, as it were, that's going around, and the hydrogen ion comes in this way, and ATP comes out this way. So it looks like as if somebody built a machine, and in fact it is a machine, but it's a machine, a protein. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Very, very exciting.
I mean, these are the kind of surprises, the kind of discoveries that...
Yes, those are the things. When you see something that is, oh my God, I could never have imagined it was like that. And those two I mentioned are both like that, you see. The GPS cell, I didn't imagine that was possible. And the little machine that makes energy for us, I didn't imagine it would be like that. So those are the exciting things. When somebody tells you or publishes a paper describing something that you wouldn't have imagined. And those are the big leaps in science.
In your Nobel lecture, you mentioned the importance of what I think you called Saturday morning experiments. Yeah. What are those, and why are they so important?
I always used to call them Saturday morning experiments in this way, that on Saturday morning the rules are different. You can do crazy experiments. You can try things that really are not completely logical. And I would like to try this, and I'd like to try that. You maybe don't have to weigh things carefully, but you should keep good notes. If you don't keep good notes, you won't be able to repeat your Saturday morning experiment. But that's what I used to call as a Saturday morning experiment. Yeah.
And my understanding is you've kept all the notes that you've taken over your decades.
Actually, I do, and we're just working on getting them archived. I have, right from when I was an undergraduate to the present day, more than 150 notebooks.
And all of them handwritten, I take it.
Yes, that's right. So it's a rather unusual record, I think. I mean, I didn't keep them because I was thinking of anything other than the fact that I liked them, and I wanted to refer back to them. So they weren't kept with any thought that they were going to be some marvelous thing for somebody someday. They were just my notebooks, and you keep the things you like. I even have some undergraduate lecture note, not lecture note, I have undergraduate essays that I wrote, so, because I liked it, this was one of my favorite ones, as it were. Keep it.
Are there any particular entries that sort of stick out to you?
Oh yes, definitely. There's one page in one notebook where I write down what I'm going to do with the gene targeting, how I'm going to do the experiment, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it, and it's all in a sense the recipe for the experiment is written on one page, and so that's definitely my favorite page. Mm-hmm. And I think it's page 150 in book Gamma. If I remember rightly.
One of the three teachers that you thanked when accepting the Nobel was your flight instructor.
Yes, right.
I was wondering, how has flying maybe affected your thinking as a scientist?
Well, I think I've said this before to people, but it's worth saying again that when you're an older person, I started to learn flying when I was at least 50. I don't remember the exact age, but that's rather old for a person to start to learn to fly. And like many people who, even younger people who start to learn to fly, they're really rather frightened. I mean, they know they want to do it, but they're really a bit frightened, and that might show by sweating, for example. And when I was learning from Field Murray how to fly on instruments, I used to get very hot and sweat would pour from me. And I remember turning to him one day and saying, because he sits in the right seat, the instructor, Field, only one drop dripped today. That was a big advance, one drop dripped. And so I can give you an example of when I later became a flight instructor, and I taught people to fly gliders. And I had one student who used to get absolutely, his shirt would be sodden when he came back from a lesson. Absolutely, just like you poured water all over him. And when he went by himself the first time, solo, which is a very important time for a pilot, he came back and with a big grin on his face, and he said, "Look, Oliver, dry." And you see, that means overcoming fear with knowledge. And that applies just as much to any other part of life as it does to flying. I mean, people think about, for example, in science, they look at this person's doing these experiments and they think, oh, I couldn't do that. That's too difficult. I'm not smart enough to do that. But you can. You can learn how to do it. So you can overcome that fear with knowledge. So it applies to all parts of life, not just to flying. And that's one thing that I learned from Field Murray, and I learned to fly, which of course has been a source of great enjoyment.
And I imagine it's also, as you say, it's just part of remaining engaged and, sort of keep trying new things. I mean, you still keep a very busy work schedule, I mean.
Yeah, I still work. Well, you see, that's part of it. You see, I keep working, but I'm doing what I like most. And so that isn't really work. And I give an example of sometimes, I gave people sometimes three names. The first name was Crick, Francis Crick, and you know who he is.
I do indeed, co-discoverer of the double helix.
The next person I mention is Rex Harrison. Do you know who he is?
Yeah, Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady, great British actor.
And the last one is Wanda Landowska. I bet you don't know that.
That one you've stumped me on.
Yeah, well, she was a famous harpsichord player.
Yes, I can see why you stumped me on that one.
Okay, yeah, right. Well, all three of them were wealthy. They'd made lots of money. And they were all working after they were 80. And so why were they working? They didn't need the money. They didn't need the fame. It wasn't work. They were doing what they loved. So that's so important for people to think about. Find what you enjoy most. And if you don't enjoy what you're doing, then change what you're doing, because you don't have a life where you work 8 hours a day at doing something you don't like in the hope that you might have something in the evening that you like. It's crazy. Most of your working days most of your working life will be spent working days, and that should be enjoyable. Quit science and play the guitar if you don't like science. Or vice versa. If you don't like playing music and you got in music school, go and train as an engineer.
What's like maybe the one thing that you'd like people to understand about science?
Well, the one thing I would say is that find a part of science that you enjoy the everyday life. Don't try to go and do science to make some big I don't say you shouldn't try to make some big discovery, but if that's the only reward you're going to get, that you won't succeed. The chances are very small that any one of us will make a big discovery. So what you have to do is do science that you enjoy the journey, as it were. As they say, better to travel, what you remember, safely than to arrive, or something. You have to enjoy the everyday things. I don't mean you have to enjoy every day. That's crazy. But your everyday life you should enjoy. And that's very important, because that's how you're going to spend most of your time.
And I have to ask this, it's maybe a little silly, but I think I certainly would love to know this. What does it feel like to win a Nobel Prize?
Well, people had talked about it for years. You see, it was, I don't remember the exact length of time, but maybe 30 years after the experiment. 20 years, more than 20 years after the experiment. So it was a sort of, people have been saying, well, are you going to get the Nobel Prize? They've been saying it for years. And so when I got it, I remember saying, feeling that's that.
You were getting much more enjoyment out of flying and out of the lab, I imagine, than just some award that you got 30 years too late.
Well, I mean, there's no question at all that you're happy if you get the Nobel Prize. It gives you a real boost, but hopefully it doesn't change your life too much. I remember Howard Temin he was a young guy, but not much older than you, and he got the Nobel Prize for his work on discovering RNA reverse transcriptase, which he worked very hard for. And I remember congratulating him, I said, and I hope, Howard, it doesn't change your life too much. And it didn't. He went on working and enjoying his work and had a good life. Unfortunately, he died early, but he had a good life. And so and basically for me, the Nobel Prize hasn't changed my life very much. Although at this stage of my life, I have a different feeling. I think probably the most, you might say, the most useful or the most helpful to other people thing that I can do is not my science. I can go on doing my science, but it's to talk to other people about it. Like I'm talking to you, to try to convey to other people little recipes that will help them enjoy their science and help them do better or have a better life if they decide to go out of science. And not to be ashamed of going out of science if you don't like it, or of saying, this problem I can't solve, I'm going to have to do something else. And those are fairly important things to tell people. I notice when I go and I tell, say there's a group of 200 or 300 students, and I talk about this, I'll often see a couple of students will go like this. When I talk about you should change if you aren't happy. And that tells me that those two students probably aren't happy in what they're doing. And suddenly I've told them, you don't have to go on doing it if you don't like it. And that's an important message. Find what you like and do that.